Hey everyone, just a heads up, this episode contains a little bit of colorful language.
But for years, Jon Stewart was my nemesis. He had figured it out. He had, I always used to think it was just because he committed to a haircut. And, the podcast, I think, is probably bigger than my stand-up, culturally.
Is that sort of a hard thing to reckon?
Yeah, it is. As I get older, that the stand-up I'm doing, I know it's the best I've done. The last special, this one too. Yeah, I'm definitely at the top of my game, and I know that. I can honestly say there's never been a better time in my life, and I'm not even sure this one is that great. So,
I'm Rachel Martin, and this is Wildcard, the game where cards control the conversation. My guest this week is Marc Maron. Marc Maron projects cynical misanthrope, and maybe that is his baseline. But in my opinion, what's made him so good as a podcaster is his ability to be vulnerable and his capacity for loving other human beings. That's why WTF, which he recently decided to end, it's why that show became one of the biggest and most beloved podcasts of all time. It's also what sets his comedy apart. He's got a new stand-up special out on HBO August 1st. It is called Panicked. And I am beyond thrilled to welcome Marc Maron to Wildcard. Hi.
Hi. Nice intro.
First three cards. 1, 2, or 3?
2.
2. Where did you get to feel independent as a kid?
Well, I guess I felt the most independent at this job I had at a restaurant across from the university.
What was the job?
Just I worked at a restaurant at a place called the Posh Bagel. It was across from University of New Mexico. So I was like 14 or probably 15, making sandwiches, doing some managing. But it was kind of a groovy place. So I was kind of in the hub of the college scene. And I kind of made the rounds around there and became sort of a fixture of that neighborhood as a teenager and a young teenager. And it kind of made me feel more grown up. It inspired me to want to do art and understand music and books and movies and people.
Not the Posh Bagel, but the larger kind of university scene?
Yeah, the few blocks. It was like just a few blocks there in Albuquerque, But there was I think it was really the place where I sort of came into contact for the first time with, stoner culture, all that stuff that was going on in probably, the late 70s. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a lot of it was the template for who I became, I think. There was a bookstore down the street that the owner became very important in my life as inspiration and mentor, the great Gus Blaisdell, Living Batch Books.
Did you just wander in there one day and strike up a conversation with him?
Yeah, he was sort of this, intense kind of, he was a very smart guy. He taught at the university, and he was sort of oversaw this little, fairly well curated bookstore. And, I just wanted to talk to him. And over the years, he would eventually talk to me. I remember it was a big deal when he finally said he'd actually have coffee with me. But he was a very funny guy and a very smart guy. And I think he inspired me to be that.
3 new cards? 1, 2, 3?
1.
What's a memorable road trip from when you were a kid?
Well, there was a time my old man was a surgeon, and we used to go. There were these conferences up in usually ski areas, so we'd go as a family, once or twice a year, drive up to these ski areas. And I want to think it was probably, I think it was probably Snowmass, which was up near Aspen. And we'd drive up in that big Caprice station wagon, me and my dad, my mom, and my brother. And I remember coming back, there was this mountain pass that was kind of harrowing. And it was snowing. It was a snowstorm. And my dad, in New Mexico, you got your driver's license when you were 15. So I couldn't have been much older than that, maybe 16. So coming back down the pass, my dad asked me if I wanted to drive, and it was a snowstorm, and it was kind of a scary drive
Because he was over it, or he wanted to test you, or what was
I don't
that
know.
about?
I think he was just, he just wanted me to step up. I don't know if it was test me, but he wanted to give me the opportunity. And you should learn how to drive in that stuff. And
That's
I was,
true.
so he let me drive. And I remember at the time, because I was already smoking cigarettes when I was 15, and I couldn't smoke around my family really. So I had this huge bag of sunflower seeds. And I was just eating them compulsively and spitting out the shells and driving through this blizzard on this mountain pass. And my mother was terrified. My brother was nervous, but my dad was kind of like, you can do it, just go slow. And I'm just eating these sunflower seeds. And the reason I remember it, we made it obviously, was that my mom remembers it. Out of all the things, she's in her 80s, but she remembers, those sunflower seeds and just how terrifying the whole experience was. But I guess that was a pretty important road trip when I was a kid.
Was that the kind of dad he was? Someone who was pretty good at seeing opportunities to give you and
No,
see if
no,
you could pass
I
that
don't.
test?
No, he definitely wasn't really good at that. He was more of a erratic, slightly emotional, and relatively mentally unstable and kind of absent kind of dad, but he was pretty exciting. All those things are pretty exciting. It's interesting to have a dad that, is a bit on the bipolar side and, you're kind of dealing with mania here and there and, getting into that energy.
Well, that's what it feels like to me. Like I've got a couple of kids and they are not old enough to drive yet, but I'm also from Idaho. I've driven a lot of snow. I
Yeah.
understand the importance of knowing how to drive through snow. And I would not choose a blizzardy mountain pass as the day that I was going to test my kid on whether or not they could get us from point A to point B.
Yeah, yeah.
That sounds
Roll the dice.
Yeah.
Let's see if he can do
just
it.
Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it was a disciplined decision.
3 more cards. 1, 2, or 3.
All right, 3.
3. What period of your life do you often daydream about?
I don't know that I do.
Is that right?
I think I reflect on things at times. I wouldn't call it daydreaming. I think certain things spark memories, and I think that I'm in a perpetual state of kind of assessing periods in my life and who I was in those periods. But I'm not really nostalgic, and I think that daydreaming about a period of one's life would imply nostalgia or some sort of yearning or looking back at a better time. I can honestly say there's never been a better time in my life, and I'm not even sure this one is that great. So, so occasionally, I think I'm more prone to kind of look at whatever triggers my kind of going back. I'm always fascinated about who was that guy? How did that guy get through that?
Right.
Like the period of time when I was a doorman at the Comedy Store, which was very, infused with drugs and insanity. And then there's also times when I was in college and with my first girlfriend and that insanity. I tried to have some compassion for that guy, but also, a certain amount of acknowledgement of, bad behavior or being, angry and not really paying attention to the people around me.
But what's the through line that you've been able to articulate in how you managed all those different transitions, whether it was like the drugs and insanity of the Comedy Store or
Toxic
other really
relationships?
difficult, toxic relationships. Like what is the personality trait or the tool or the specific person who gave you guidance? What's the thing that continues to be the lifeline for you over all those episodes?
I think my journey has always been about kind of being my full self somehow, or finding myself, but not in a hokey way, in a very real way. I think that because of the nature of my parents' emotional sort of manipulation. Like, I don't want to say manipulation. They're very self-centered people that were not good at parenting. And they were, I was just sort of an extension of their worries and needs. So I believe that through most of my life, I was not fractured, but kind of missing a piece that would have enabled me to be grounded in myself. And because of that, my journey has always been to arrive there. I think that's really why I did stand-up. There was a certain amount of fear of the world that I had. And for some reason, I think stand-up put me in a position to own myself, that I really felt like it was a way. I never thought of myself as an entertainer. I talk a bit about this on the new special, but I really thought that I had things I wanted to say. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to have my own space in doing that. I wanted to be reckoned with. And I think it was really a journey to arrive at myself, sometimes in toxic ways, sometimes in shocking ways, very rarely in compassionate ways. But I think through all that, bucking and thrashing, I started to see who I was at the center of all that. And I think emotionally, and I think I am emotionally probably a lot younger than I'd like to be. And I think that I wrote a line once. I don't know. I think I used it in a special years ago. The monster I created to protect the child inside me is sometimes hard to manage.
Yeah.
But that monster's very, very docile now. And the other part is, I think, kind of growing up-ish.
So, let's take a break from the game. You're in one of my favorite places because it seems to me you're like on the cusp of a new thing, of a new chapter of your life. Like you're wrapping up WTF after 16 odd years.
Yeah.
And you got a new special. I mean, you turn out specials. It's not like you haven't done a special in a while, but you're still at a big moment, right?
Yeah.
Does it feel like that to you?
I guess I never stopped, doing stand-up. I am a lifer and a compulsive, worker when it comes to stand-up. It was always the priority in my life. From the beginning of the podcast, it was very hard for me to transition into this role of, talking to people and, surrendering stage. And once people started to know me from the podcast, it drove me nuts that they didn't necessarily know my stand-up. It was always a battle. I wanted to be known as a stand-up first and foremost. So that evolved over time, and things shifted in terms of me accepting all these different roles I had. But I started to accept that I was this conversationalist that people listen to twice a week. And I also wanted them to come see the comedy. But the comedy was always the most important thing in terms of what I set out to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
the
what
podcast,
you wanted to be valued for.
Yeah, the podcast was this other thing that, that I did in a fairly desperate time where the stand-up wasn't working out. Like at the beginning of the podcast, I felt that I was on the other side, if not, fading into obscurity as a stand-up. So they both sort of coexisted and both sort of elevated. The podcast, I think, is probably bigger than my stand-up, culturally.
Is that sort of a hard thing to reckon with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, it is. But I do know as I get older that the stand-up I'm doing, I know it's the best I've done. The last special, this one too. Yeah, I'm definitely at the top of my game, and I know that. So it's not, I'm not looking for something. Yeah. I'm executing something at the top of my ability with complete control of my craft. So whatever comes from it is what it is. Do I feel on some level that I should be recognized more as a comic? Yeah, I guess. But I also know that I'm not everybody's thing. And I know that I do things that guarantee that.
Did becoming this very, very skilled conversationalist, which involves a lot of listening and not talking, did that change your comedy? Did that help your observational powers?
I think so. I mean, look, in going back to these connections I've been making recently in conversations about who I was growing up and my need to talk to people and my need to engage with people, which has always been there. Like I was somebody. Like if you listen to my podcasts, and I've known this for years, if I'm talking to somebody with a strong personality, which is many people, but they have either a way of talking or an accent that I will appropriate it within 5 or 10 minutes of talking to them. There are many shows, whether I'm talking to, an old Jewish man or an African-American person that, at some point, my producer is very sensitive to it because sometimes it's subtle, but I will take on their vocal attributes.
Totally. I get it. I completely get it. Yeah. So, it's an act of generosity, although it can kind of come off as
it's
weird
not conscious.
sometimes.
No, it's not consciously generous. I don't think I'm trying to do something. I think that
I think you're trying to sympathize with that person. You're trying to
connect,
make them comfortable. Right.
I don't know if that's true. I think I want to be them. I mean, I'd like to believe that I had the type of boundaries and control that you're implying, but I think that the way they seem to be seems in that moment or in my mind to be kind of more interesting than me.
Than you.
So, and very early on, I was and I still am. I'm an interrupting conversationalist. I do press myself in, and that's out of the same intention that it is about conversation. But it's also about me. So there's this mixture of me wanting to be other people and then me wanting them to see me and then me wanting to connect with them. Yeah. But very little of it, comes from a controlled place initially. It was just me if somebody's talking too long, part of me sort of like I'm disappearing. Hey, well, let me say something now. I'm going to say some things. But that's a conversation.
That is a conversation, but I also think you're not alone in feeling more seen and heard and understood in relationship to another person. I mean, I guess there are a handful of people who are like, I'm a self-contained, happy, functioning unit here. But most of us are happy and find meaning and purpose in relationship to other people, whether those are long-term relationships or whether they're just like a short-term. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you for an hour for this show.
Yeah, it's a big part. It's a huge part of my my kind of social, spiritual, psychological life. And I do feel very close to the person by the end of it. And that's kind of an interesting, heartbreaking part of that whole endeavor is that because of the type of conversations I have with people, it's really, we do get kind of close.
Yeah.
And then they just go and,
they just leave your life. You just walk out of your
That's
garage.
Right. And there's times where I'm like, I should be friends with that guy, and then you're like, he's a big actor. What are you going to just call him? So there are very few people that I actually pursued friendships with, but the couple that I did, I definitely, I'm glad I did.
It's weird though, right? You're like, was this like a summer camp romance?
Summer, yeah. It was
for real. Are we gonna be for real friends?
Yeah, there is that feeling. It doesn't have quite the foundation of summer camp romance, but it does feel very connected and like a real exchange of feelings and thoughts.
You're gonna grieve that? Are you already preemptively?
Yeah, no, I think I am in it now, but there is an elation to it. I think the grieving is, we're ready to stop. There comes a time where, you can either look at what you produce as disposable and just, throwing it into, the kind of, ever churning zeitgeist garbage bin of content. And, but we never really approached it like that. We have created something that's maintained its quality, and every one of them is sort of surprising. They are to me, so they must be to other people. And, the arc of this thing is that, we did all right in the end here. And it just becomes a question is, why keep doing something just because you can or just because you do? Mm-hmm. It's never really been, there was no way to make money at the beginning of this. So that was never our intention. Our intention seemed to be not even high-minded, just to do a great thing and to do it as well as we could. And, so the money came and the attention came, and we did okay. And it's okay to stop things, You don't want things to either, fade away or, kind of, become, the quality becomes dubious or you don't want to do it.
Because of external forces that make you. Like, you can do it on your own terms.
Right.
Round 2. God. 3 new cards. 1, 2, or 3?
3.
Have you ever had a nemesis?
Yeah, I always have a nemesis. I always have one. Yeah, most of that is fueled by resentment, insecurity, jealousy, or whatever. But I've always had nemesises, for different reasons. But yeah, I always have a nemesis.
You must find utility in it.
No, it's habit, and it's the never-ending sort of struggle against acting out of insecurity or resentment, self-acceptance. But so I have fewer. But for years, Jon Stewart was my nemesis. I mean, for most of my professional life, I always was like, when I was coming up as a comic, he had figured it out. He had, I always used to think it was just because he committed to a haircut and a way of presenting. But he was just everywhere. He was. What's the
news as satire, and that was like a space you wanted to.
Yeah, and he was a stand-up, but but he was just coming up. He was everywhere. He was the king of the thing, politics, satire, whatever. Yeah. And it was just, I was just there was a jealousy to it, but it got consuming. But it went on a long time, and he knew it. And we've had confrontations about it, and and we are not friends, and that was always the case. And sure, it was jealousy, it was resentment, and it was me being kind of small-minded. But but it went on a long time.
Do you find your way to admiring something about him in the end? Can you step back from that and look at him objectively and say, no, you're good at that thing. And I do a different thing. And I do me.
Sometimes. I mean, I think, over the arc of it, the fact that he's kind of like everybody landed with a podcast, that's satisfying. But no, but no.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Your friend, Marc Maron.
Help create it. I'll tell you honestly. And, I don't know that. Yeah, why not? I'll tell you. So, early on in the podcast, a lot of it was built on, me kind of trying to make amends with people I thought I had offended or that I had problems with, mostly people in my community. And there was a point there where, and John and I had been through it, and there's no relationship there, and he does not particularly like me. I don't think it's a daily thing, but I annoyed him to the point where that was reality. But early on in the podcast, I remember because I was recording the Gallagher episode. I was in Portland, Oregon, in a hotel room, and I was like, I should, reach out to John because, we've got this historical problem, or at least I do. And, we could work it out on the air. It'd be great. Yeah. It's like exactly what I do now.
All right.
So I reached out to him, and I remember, he called me back. I was in a hotel room in Portland, and he goes, hey, it's Jon Stewart. I'm like, hey man, how you doing? And he's like, I'm fine. What's up? And I said, look, I'm doing this podcast thing. And, I just, there's a lot of people I'm kind of working out things with and kind of making an amends and stuff. And I thought it'd be great if, you and I, did that. And he goes, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not, he said, look, it's like whatever you're doing, there's no love here. And, and then he said, I'm sure what you're doing is very creative. But there's just no love here. And I'm like, got it, dude. And, so I guess it was pretty creative.
Next three, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, 1.
What do you feel as if you're constantly chasing?
I guess it's some form of external validation, which is ridiculous, but it's real. I've done a lot of things in a lot of different mediums, and I'm I've done a good job with a lot of them. I still think I have, but. I talk about this with my producer. It's like, we won. We did great. We helped create something, a medium. Yeah. We made something singular. My comedy is singular. All this stuff. I get all that. But there is something about the validation of your peers or some external recognition, outside of an audience when you work in a creative profession. And it all seems, and no matter how much you rationalize it, there are things that I'm still, not hung up on, but I'm disappointed about and a bit angered about it. The fact that WTF never got a Peabody it's a fucking crime. It's a fucking crime. So, but whatever. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I had a sitting president, come to my garage, and that wasn't worthy. Whatever.
I know. I get it.
But
you don't want to be attached to those external metrics of success, but it's also hard not to be.
But it's like it's an external metric of success, but it's an acknowledgement from a supposedly revered institution that recognizes, what you do.
Yeah, but institutions aren't in anymore, Marc Maron.
No. I get all that. I get it's just a group of people. One of them could not like me, that, the voters are whoever does the voting when it comes to Emmys or whatever. I get all that. But there is something about that is like, I've never won anything really. We got a big podcasting award, from the governors of whatever. And, in the Library of Congress stuff, there have been little things
That's
like
a thing?
that. No, it's a thing. But there are these things that you grow up with. That, you kind of want that recognition. Yeah. And, I've accepted that I'm not the guy that wins anything. And I do believe I did great work in that it's not a meritocracy. It's not based on anything but a group of people who have their own sort of shortcomings, voting their feelings.
Yeah.
I get it.
Beliefs, 1, 2, or 3?
2.
What's a place you consider sacred?
Oh, well, certainly that original garage where I did the podcast, that was really a pretty sacred space. It was a very unique space, but I had to let that go. That was kind of hard.
Yeah.
And then moving into the new house, which doesn't have the same kind of organic nature that place had just from all the clutter and everything else. I think that's a pretty sacred space, or it was.
What did the original Cat Ranch garage look and smell like?
Well, there was just hundreds of old books and pieces of art and bits of tchotchkes and just layers and layers of stuff. So I had that smell of kind of like slowly decaying books. And, and it had, there was a rug in there it was just like everything that I had amassed in the form of knickknacks and books and things and random pieces of art from my whole life were kind of in there. And at some points, it was like it was like a museum of me, and like I didn't clean it that much other than vacuum it, so it kind of got that kind of dusty vibe of an old roadside museum, and I had to at some point really do a more thorough dusting. It had a musty kind of vibe to it, yeah.
Also, I'm a little woo-woo, and I feel like in a space, a physical space like that has a personality and an identity, and then you layer upon it all the conversations, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations, and the people's energy that is in that space, exactly. In that chair, in that mic. Yeah. That's heavy, good stuff.
Yeah. I remember when I'd vacuum and I'd get all this dust up, I'm like, so many skin for...
Totally. Totally. I know some people are like, that's so gross. But I'm like, what if there was like President Obama's fingernail?
Sure.
In that stuff.
Or just like they say, a lot of dust is like skin.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought about that all the time. Yeah, there's a magic to it.
3 more cards. 1, 2, or 3?
1.
When do you feel connected to the people you've lost?
Sometimes it's random. With people who are my peers that have died, and there's a lot of them, and so many of them were funny people. I can think about their funniness, their jokes, my experience with them. And then they become alive again, pretty quickly. With the deeper one, and there's really just one primary one with Lynn Shelton, it's just thinking about,
for people who don't know, Lynn was your longtime friend, collaborator, and then love, big love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With her, it was just, that feeling of, the way she kind of saw me, that, her belief in me and her kind of, almost obsessive, love for me, that when I was in the light of that, I really felt like I was my best self. So if I can think of her just, watching me, do whatever it is I do, that's when I feel connected. And I also have like a few things of hers that are around. So she's always kind of around.
Yeah. It took me a long time to give away my mom's clothes. I kept them in my closet for probably much longer than, there's still some things in there.
I kept a few things. I kind of distributed a lot of stuff to people that loved her, and then her friends kind of took a lot of stuff. But I have a few select items.
It's funny I don't know about you, but the random things that I ended up keeping, I have a butter dish from my mom. So weird. Not a thing I even ever associated with it, but it's like there's the obvious stuff that I could have kept, like a jewelry or like a blanket, something. And it's like I look at this butter dish that she gave me that I didn't want because I didn't want a life with butter dishes. But she gave this to me, so it was kind of like a gift with some baggage. And yet there is the thing. And every time I look at the butter dish, I think of her and then I get emotional.
I have my grandma's melon baller. And
that's a good grandma thing.
Yeah, and I have Lynn's. I have one of she wore a very specific hat, and she had a few of them. I have one of those. I have the shirt that she wore when I met her, and for a while there, maybe a couple of years, in the main hallway. When you walk into my house, there's a coat rack, and I had her hat and this leather jacket that she loved hanging, and then her red cowboy boots. Mm-hmm. But it was almost like, it's almost the size of her. So like I'd walk in and it'd just be those things, which defined her in a lot of ways. Eventually I had to move it. And I eventually gave the jacket to somebody who loved her and who I thought, would really appreciate it. It was kind of a big moment. I gave it to Rosemary DeWitt. who was in one of Lynn's films, and it fit her, And I was like, that's that should be yours. But yeah, I have I have some pieces of art, and yeah.
But I will say it's a really powerful thing to be able to feel her when you feel yourself being whatever, your best version, the self that you are most proud of because of her.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you are living the best version of your life is when you feel connected to her. And that is a really special thing that I'm sure that she would feel very proud of, having not known her.
Yeah, I hope so.
Marc Maron, we end the show the same way every time, with a trip in our memory time machine. In this memory time machine, you will pick one moment in your past to revisit. It is not a moment you would change anything about. It is just a moment you would like to linger in a little longer. What moment do you choose?
I guess I would choose... I guess I would choose that first time that I met Lynn when she came on the podcast.
There's something immediately that you knew? Or that you were just drawn to?
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Did the conversation go on after you stopped the taping?
A bit.
Like, did you linger or?
Sure. Yeah, we talked, but it was just like one of those things, like in my mind, like I had somehow known that it was going to be something special. But yeah, and after that, she came and saw me do comedy. So yeah, but it was just that kind of first, thing.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing could, we just became friends. But I knew something. And yeah. It took years to really kind of materialize, but and it was all a big struggle, and it was a challenge, but yeah, it was kind of that was the good moment. There there are some bad moments that I'd probably like to linger in too, just so I know
Why?
that because I got through them.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Marc Maron.
Yeah.
Longtime host of the WTF podcast. He's got a new comedy special. It is called Panicked. It's out on HBO August 1st. It's been a real pleasure for me to get to do this. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you.